Hey everybody, this is JDGaming back today with another episode of Get Better at Yu-Gi-Oh! So last week we talked about the various defensive options that exist in the game in the form of trap cards or otherwise, and this week I'd like to go kind of on a tangent on that and discuss more about how to deal with defenses and kind of how you cancel out your opponent's defensive measures, and on the other hand, have enough defenses for what your opponent is trying to do. So it's building off of what we've covered last week. You can find the link to that previous episode down in the description box below, and you can find some articles relating to these topics as usual as well. So first, a quick reminder of what a defense is. Well, the types of cards can differ, but in general, when you have a card like, say, Solemn Strike, you're trying to use this as a way of stopping your opponent's key plays so that you can go protect your own cards from your opponent's moves, as well as leave them open to your attacks. So if you look at something like Solemn Strike against a deck like, say, classic Frog Monarchs, every turn they will bring back Treeborn Frog, tribute it, and summon a Monarch. So if you are playing against these Monarchs, and you have a Solemn Strike, you can use that to stop that one Caius that's played that turn, block its effect off, and for the cost of one card and 1500 life, you're able to clear your opponent's threat. So you'd probably call that a successful defense. And it's important to note the perspective of that deck and how it's actually able to pump out its threats. In the case of that Frog Monarch deck, you have one tribute summon every single turn. It's very consistent though, and you can expect a Monarch to hit the field every turn. Of course, with newer variants of the deck that recently just got hit, you still have one tribute monster that's played every single turn very reliably that's supposed to break up your setups and I guess push more aggressively with the newer Monarchs. That'd be like the key difference here. But you could still use a trap card or two in most cases be able to stop the deck. But what if you go and play a different strategy? Think back to a deck like Burning Abyss, or I'm going to use a classic example because everyone already knows Burning Abyss right now. Think back to Chaos. You summon a monster like Tour Guide, and let's say you go and you hit it with your Breakthrough skill. Okay, so you stopped Tour Guide from the Underworld. That's good. But then they have materials in the graveyard, so then they drop a Chaos Sorcerer. Well, good thing you have your Solemn Strike to stop that summon too, right? And that's gone, and then all of a sudden they drop a BLS on top of that because the Chaos deck just happens to be one that can play multiple special summon monsters to the board and be able to put more aggression in the face of your trap cards. Now all of a sudden, if you had a single Solemn Strike, that wouldn't have done you much at all. In fact, if you had just had the Strike, as in the previous scenario, you'd still be dealing with these two big monsters that could end the game right then and there, and that's not good. So first, what you have to do is look at the decks that you expect to play against and see how many monsters can they pump out at one time. If you think of various decks that have been popular throughout the years, things like Fire Fists are limited to one normal summon a turn. We already discussed Monarchs are limited to one normal summon a turn. Even a deck like Plant Synchro was limited largely to that one summon every turn, because unless they had a lot of spells ready, like One for One or Foolish, or they already had plants in the grave, they wouldn't be able to get anything going. However, at the same time, we have monsters like Burning Abyss, the Chaos we just talked about, and a lot of others that are just able to go spam special summon, in which case you're not able to effectively stop them if you can only stop one play. And so if we revisit the concept last week, looking at some of these back row again, the advantages and disadvantages can be entirely based on whether or not they hit all the threats your opponent has. So we talked already about how Solemn Warning and Strike can only hit one guy at a time. The main reason they're popular though is that they pretty much cover all bases in terms of monsters. You're stopping all summons with this, and any special summon or monster effect with the Strike. So they have a lot of coverage, but again, if your opponent's able to throw down more than one monster, then the Solemns might actually be bad for you because you end up just weakening your own life, allowing your opponent to just push in for game faster. And that's why for a while there were times when Solemn Warning, or even before Solemn Judgment got forbidden, there was a time when that card wouldn't see as much play because stopping one card just wasn't enough. You look at something like Breakthrough Skill, and it's interesting because something like this may have one use, like Valor, but because it has that second shutdown ability, if you plan on playing against something like Cyber Dragon Infinity that might be a continuous threat to you, then that additional use that you get out of Breakthrough Skill might make it a superior choice over something like Effect Valor or even some of the Solemns. And then if you look at these two classic field wipes here, Torrential and Mirror Force were both valued for the longest time because of their ability to take out multiple monsters at the same time. And so whereas their triggers might not be optimal, Torrential is much easier than Mirror Force, but they both have some sort of trigger that needs to be met to activate. The fact is that the payoff of killing all your opponent's monsters was sometimes enough to justify playing them if you were able to completely stop your opponent's aggression for that turn and keep your guys safe. And now it's time to look at the flip side of things, because whereas defenses may be the topic today, if you think about it, you are also playing the role as an attacker with your own strategy and need to be able to deal with your opponent who's going through this defensive process. Whether you are using the classic Mystical Space Typhoon, the newly popularized Twin Twisters, or the very new Cosmic Cyclone, the fact is how many of these guys you play in your strategy in the main side combined really depends on the types of plays your deck is able to make. Obviously, this is a big enough discussion that it could be a video on its own, and if you guys want, I can go through and say, like, why would you play a certain one out of these cards? But for right now, I just want to go over this concept here. If you are a strategy, let's say you are Frog Monarchs, or you are a deck like Plant Synchro, and you can only play one, maybe two monsters in a turn so you don't get the kind of aggression that you get with Burning Abyss. You may want to consider playing more copies of back row removal if you expect your opponents to play defenses in the form of trap cards, because that will allow you to clear the field so that you can make your plays. If every time you go and summon your key monster and you get bottomless, breakthrough, or solemn warninged or striked, and you can't make your play, you end up 1-for-1ing with your opponent, so you're not down in cards, but you lose so much momentum and give your opponent so much extra time in their extra turn that they've got that you're going to fall behind. Ideally, if your opponent has one or two back row, you're going to be able to deal with them with these types of cards so that you'll be able to push your main plays. At the same time, you also want to consider, remember back to goal-oriented dueling, you want to make sure that you are saving these cards for your key play so that when your opponent has a defense and you need to make that lone fire go off, or you need to get that Brotherhood of the Firefist Bear to destroy your opponent's monster, you have the option to do so because your opponent has nothing to throw at you as a counter. So these are just some things to keep in mind. You have to make sure that you play cards like this in your deck and then actually activate them at appropriate times that will allow you to go and get your one play off. However, if you're a deck like Burning Abyss or any other strategy that has the ability to special summon a ton of monsters and the monsters don't combo into each other necessarily, then you probably don't need to worry about back row all that much unless your opponent's just playing a ton of defenses like Demise Cosmo, in the past Geargia, something like that, where they just set 4 or 5. And the reason I mentioned combo strategies in particular is let's take a look at a deck like Synchron. When you have your one normal summon that goes special summons and then from there you synchro, which creates tokens or does whatever, brings back tuners, you need to make sure that each of those play sequences sticks so that you don't end up getting screwed over. If you get your Hyper Librarian destroyed by a trap card, for instance, then your whole strategy is going to fall apart because you can't keep up with the resources necessary to make all of your plays. And so in that type of strategy, you may still consider your deck as one that functionally gets 1 or 2, however many monsters out in its initial stages of play, and then from there just happens to net the resources along the way. So really take a look at your deck and decide how many threats can you present at once. If you can't present too many threats, you probably want the support of back row removal or defense removal like these so that you can make sure your deck goes on its way. Of course, the particular cards that will fall into the roles that I've described in this video may change over time. You're not always going to play against the same strategies, and that's kind of why I wanted to choose some throwback examples. You don't necessarily see Chaos or Frog Monarchs all the time, and you don't even see cards like Torrential Tribute played in every single deck anymore. However, the concepts still hold, and as long as you understand why is it that people were playing these types of defenses and this number of MST or whatever, you can start to use that information going forward, and as the formats change, adapt to them so that you are able to best deal with that situation. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know down in the comment section what you think about this topic. If you have any special tips on defenses or on clearing your opponent's defenses, then I'd love to hear them down below. And if you have any other ideas for future episodes of this series, then I'd love to hear those as well. Thanks guys, this is JDGaming. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.